folks, welcome to another Besides the Norm podcast. My name is Steve. We have Monk on the other side of the table. Weird introduction every time. So we have on the line Chic Brodie from Scotia Future. How are you doing, Chic?
I'm fine. Nice day. Well, I hope it's a nice day everywhere. It's a sunny day here, but cold, but it's fine.
We have had...
a bit of snow earlier.
Well, we have had a weird mix of, like, it was raining earlier on the day, and then we've had... It
was quite sunny when I woke up.
It was quite sunny, and then it's been snowing, and then I got to Dour,
and then it's sunny again.
I knew it was extremely sunny, and now it's back to Dour again. So we've had a weird day of weather.
Yes, it's Scotland. It's what Scotland does.
And can Scotia Future fix this in the upcoming elections?
Sorry?
And can Scotia Future fix this in the upcoming elections?
Well, I sincerely hope that May the 7th is a very bright day, at least for some of us.
That's it. Well put.
Politician answer right there.
Awesome. So, we'll basically just get started. We'll talk a wee bit about what happened. Like, what was your childhood like, Chic?
Very happy. My father came home from war, and we ended up living in a prefab in Dundee, which was great. I went to school and at Downfield Primary School in Dundee. Did reasonably well. I was encouraged by wonderful parents who made sure I did my homework, and I was inducted Downfield, went to Morgan Academy, went through there, and eventually went to what was Queen's College of St Andrews University, but was Queen's College was based in Nethergate in Dundee. Mm-hmm. So it was fairly good. I played football. I played for Dundee Schoolboys, and wide experience, and just all down to good parenting and kindness.
Mm-hmm. So, where would you say your first sort of political thing came up? Like, what first got you into the idea of, like, even starting into politics?
Well, we had a neighbour who was actually a councillor in Dundee. We moved up to West Girton, and we had this neighbour who was a very, very, very good politician. He was a member of the Labour Party. And I kind of got attracted to that when I was at university. Before I went to university, it was fairly stimulating. I did a lot of babysitting for him and his good lady, and occasionally was welcome to have a conversation and debate with him. I found that stimulating. Got involved in that, and then went to university and started to ask a lot more questions rather than just blindly follow, and ended up joining the Liberals. And my first sortie into politics was standing in 1974 as a very young Liberal candidate in Dundee. And the previous Liberal candidate in Dundee had been Winston Churchill, so I had high hopes.
Can imagine.
I did that. And then 79 I fought it again, and then I became the candidate in Glasgow Hill Head. We were doing very well as Liberals, but the SDP started that time, and I was asked to negotiate with Mr. Roy Jenkins to see if I would stand aside to let him fight. There was a by-election. The local Tory MP had died, regrettably. And I stood aside after some negotiations with Jenkins. I went down to his house in London, in Marylebone. We had long conversations. I had to get him to make no announcement unless he made it in Scotland, if we agreed. Mm-hmm. He did agree on certain policies like Home Rule for Scotland, and I don't know if that stuck in his throat, but he certainly agreed to do that. Stood aside, and he won the by-election. So that kind of carried on. And by that time, I had a fairly interesting career. I'd worked for NCR in manufacturing, and then came down to Ayr as the European business manager for a company called Digital. And I became the candidate in Ayr in 1983, and we did well there. Almost George Younger was the Tory MP, and it would have needed dynamite to get him out of the seat. But we almost came from nowhere to almost knock Labour out of second place. And then I went off to work with major computer companies in London, and then ultimately in Europe. Then came back to Scotland, and I'd always had I became a councillor, an independent councillor in Surrey, because I love politics. It's a great enabler of finding out what people want and need. Mm-hmm. And so I came back here, I think late 90s, and started my own business, helping small businesses and turning around companies that were in trouble, but getting more and more involved in politics. And I was a Liberal Democrat, but there's a famous saying that some people leave their principles for the sake of the party, and other people leave their party for the sake of the principles. And I tend to follow in the second there, because having joined the Liberals when they were keen on having more independence for communities, more home rule for Scotland, I found that they'd rapidly changed that. And so Mr. Wallace and I, Jim Wallace, Lord Wallace, had a wee disagreement about who he should coalesce with at the 2003 election. And he wanted to put his lot with Labour as well. That's not what we originally stood for, so I left. And I was asked to join the SNP, which I did. I became an SNP MSP in 2011. And the same principle applies in terms of party and principle. I left the SNP in 2016. And again, just because of my ongoing interest, with others who had a similar view, about February of last year, we kicked off this idea of starting a new party, and eventually got Scotia Future registered. Took some time with the Electoral Commission. We spent a lot of time developing policies, because that's what I think politics should be about. Mm-hmm. It should be about policies and not personalities, which is a wee bit of a regret in this election. But so that's where we are. A brief resume as to why I'm here, looking out my study window at a wee blackbird, not a magpie, a wee blackbird. So
sounds good. So, I was slightly surprised by your sort of first entry into politics, because reading the Scotia Future policies, you would be sort of fine to accidentally mistake Scotia Future as sort of a socialist party. Some of the policies are there, including the nationalisation of an energy company and a lot more sort of social, sort of cooperative views and stuff.
I think it's more social justice. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the companies I was asked to do a turnaround in by one of the banks. Frankly, I asked the board to go, the directors to go, because the company was in trouble. There was 80 jobs at risk. We got their shares back on the basis that they didn't have to lose their homes. And my view is that, if people put their labour into a company, okay, people put their money into a company, but we gave the shares to the shares I got back. Most of them went to the people who worked in the company. Now you can say that's socialism, workplace democracy, and the company is doing very well. Was doing well pre-pandemic, certainly.
Yeah.
So social justice and democracy applies, and not just in the town halls and the parliaments. It has to reach out to where it really matters, which is in the communities and in the workplace. And so, while I believe in democracy and social justice, I also believe that one of the ways that we can reduce the level of poverty and get more participation and give real independence to real people is by getting them involved. And so if that's socialism, I stand guilty. But I'm equally of the view that you need capital and labour to work together. If we're going to be a successful country, that's what we have to have.
So what other policies would you say were sort of main focuses in the next session of Parliament?
Well, I mean, there's loads of the Constitution, obviously. How do we, when I was saying about talking about policies, when you talk about independence, independence in itself is not an end. It's what you do with it. So we've developed policies around how do we move the country forward by the relationships we have externally. We'd like to join EFTA, for example. We'd like to have relationships with the Nordic Council because we share some similarities geographically and weather-wise. We don't want to be part of the UK, but again, there's no reason why we couldn't have the British Ireland Council because there are things that we share largely because of being close. So that kind of constitution. We want to reduce the cost of government, and by doing that, we could start to push out more power and more authority to local communities. We see the 32 councils. We could reduce the cost of that by sharing in what we call federated units, sharing the costs of services that they share, like IT and finance, and also build on the kind of growth deals that we have and have economic development as a major element in as part of the, if you like, the further independence creation further down the chain. But then also, how do we put Scotland back to work? And that's going to be very, very important. That's going to be a major issue after the pandemic. And how do we invest, whether we certainly capital investment in housing, and we've talked about how do we create a scenario where we build targets and achieve targets of socially affordable housing and using a rent cycle. And one of the interesting things, just in the aside, we have talked about energy and what we do with creating an energy corporation, which, and I'll remind you, we started our manifesto 8 months ago. We would have a national corporation called Alba Energy, Energy, just as we would have a housing corporation called Alba Housing, and so on. So I don't know who picked up the bits of our manifesto, but I seem to have heard that word used elsewhere in the past couple of weeks. But, it's important, again, that you're part of the policies. These policies are well thought of policies, and I'll send you a copy of our manifesto if you wish. But pages of housing, education, civil liberties, what we do with the land and countryside. We change the means of funding local authorities by having a land value tax rather than a council tax. We look at business rates in terms of how do we encourage, particularly young people, to start social enterprises and small businesses. Let's say civil liberties, decentralising. The centralisation of police has been a disaster.
Yeah.
So the likes of decentralising that and decentralising some of the other stuff that can be done just as well as at a federal level, i.e. for example, I live in South Ayrshire. There is no reason why we can't have one Ayrshire sharing services like economic development, decentralising the police and the fire service, and so on, and clearly, of course, being able to share IT and finance and things that are all use all the same systems. So that can all be done by a federal unit. But I think it's been a very profitable 8 months, and of course the biggie is how would Scotland handle its the basic needs of an independent country, like currency. So we have a proposal on that, and how would we address that challenge in relation to pensions? And what would we do? We would come out of NATO. We'd join the Partnership for Peace. We would ask the UK government to remove Trident from Scotland. I mean, it's a nonsense anyway, because there's only one person that has the power to fire a Trident missile, and that's not in 10 Downing Street. That's in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
So we're not even have the capability. So we get rid of that. We would not join the EU because, again, it's heavily over-centralised. It's a broken system, just as Westminster is broken because it's got the House of Lords unelected, 810 of them as a revising chamber. The Holyrood system is broken, and we've seen it in the run up to this election, where you've got the list system being used to propagate a particular view, when there are a whole load of things that we should do with a proper single transferable vote system. So, yeah, I'm sorry to go on, but we'll send you a copy of the manifesto, and you call us back and tell us where we've gone wrong.
The EU thing was another interesting one. Again, why I thought you might have been mistaken as a socialist party by some... Because again, a lot of socialist parties don't put in their manifesto, we want socialism tomorrow. They put in sort of some nationalised industries, they put in some things, some reformist things,
there's always
then move from there.
There's always like a road to socialism sort of thing. That's kind of what I don't know if this is offensive to you, but that's what I saw in the policies that I was reading, especially the way you described the EU. I think it was a financial corrupt thing. I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but that sounded sort of roughly where I stand as well. So that was sort of where my mistake came from.
No, that's not a mistake. I mean, and come back to socialism. I mean, it depends how you define socialism. But the main sort of vehicle for socialism in this country has been the Labour Party. And when they had real opportunities to hand power back to the people, what you found was they were as guilty as approving unelected lords that had and taking up paid jobs with no real authority in directorships and what have you. True socialism, in my book, is giving power back to where people can actually have an effect on their own lives, and we've lost that. Yeah. In terms of the EU, I ran 8 companies in Europe up until 1998, and I was very pro-European in terms of understanding, the cultures and the characteristics, and was sympathetic to you. But what has actually happened? We saw it happen with Greece. We're seeing it happen with Poland and Hungary. It's the German banks that run Europe. It's not. It's not the people of Greece or the people of Spain or the people of Poland that have a really meaningful say. If we get to a crisis, and we saw with the attempt on the vaccinations, that power emanates just as it does in the UK from Westminster or in Scotland from Edinburgh, there's a great concentration exercised by very few people in Brussels. And when I was on the Economy Committee, I went in 2013 to Brussels to try and understand their views on the budget that was being prepared. And there were 3 MSPs sitting in the room. And in came 12 civil servants. 12. And I actually asked the question, well, why are there 12 of you here? We just need to understand. Well, we all represent different countries, and but at the end of the day, Joe Blow, from Whitlet's in Ayr, is losing some of his tax because ultimately it ends up here. It's a piece of nonsense.
So I assume that would carry on to the monarchy and things like that. I assume you'd be a Republican as well.
No, what we said we would do is that in an independent Scotland there would be a choice given to the people as to whether they want an elected head of state or they wanted to continue with the monarchy. I have some problems again with the old boys network that emanates from, indirectly from the monarchic institutions that we had. And again, I don't think there's certainly if you like, this particular monarchy seems to have redeemed itself with the public, not at large, certainly the majority of people, but it should be up to the people to decide if they want an elected head of state, and that would be in an independent Scotland, or do they want a continuation of the monarchy?
So are these reasons why you left the SNP? Because the SNP don't seem to want to go down that route?
No, I basically left the SNP, to be very frank, because in itself, it was becoming very centralised, as we've seen. That the decision could be made by a handful of people. I took a divergent views. For example, I was asked by somebody to raise the petition. I was on the petitions committee. I was asked to raise the issue of why are the judiciary free from having their expenses and their hospitality and everything else made public, and yet MSPs, MPs, other people had to do it. So I agreed to raise a members' debate to say that I thought that the Lord President should be asked to present his expenses, as should every senior member of the judiciary. That wasn't looked on too well by certain people in the hierarchy of the SNP. I also opposed, after a discussion with people in the universities and students, what have you, I opposed the universities bill because we were setting up another hierarchy, largely proposed by some student organisations and some of the trade unions, when there was a reasonable organisation already in place. Okay, it might have needed improvement, but I opposed the universities bill. That too didn't go down too well. And there seemed to be an awful lack of willing to have conversations to arrive at policies. And it was, in some cases, I felt it's my way or the highway, and clearly I ended up on the highway.
Do you feel like a lot of that is because they're so happy in their spot right now? Because I've always felt like that for a while, that they would get to the point of where they were so happy in their spot that nothing controversial
complacent.
would... Complacent. Aye,
don't want to rock the boat too much in case they lose power or whatever.
Aye.
Yeah, I've got to be very careful what I say. I think the situation is, there's an issue of competence and experience. I've been lucky. And some of my colleagues I know have been very lucky in terms of competence experience in the outside world. There's a question of competence. I think there's an issue of fear. That if you take a decision without meaningful conversation and involvement, then you have to shore it up as best you can if it's not working. I mean, if you look at the expenditures, and I'll talk about things like BIFAB or the Clyde ferries. I won't go too much into the inquiry, but people that haven't done their job, and they're soaking up money that could be used for helping drug addiction, helping poverty, helping people, youngsters get houses. If we're wasting money like that, which is a level of, I think, competence, experience linked to fear, then I'm sorry, they should go. It's you go. If I go around and ask, I won't say which area of government it was, but I was talking to somebody who said that they were about to do a performance appraisal on the chief executive. Oh, and I said, well, and what goals, what performance goals does this chief executive have? And he said, oh, the CEO doesn't have any performance goals. I said, well, how the blazes can you appraise their performance and, if you like, give them an increase in salary or a bonus if you can't measure their performance because they don't have any goals, they don't know where they're heading. And I think, if you like, that might be my business head taking over my political head too much, but it's when you consider it's the public penny that's being spent, and it might be spent in better ways, in better needs, then it's appalling. For example, drug addiction. My Andy Doig, who's my co-conspirator in this exercise, he works social work up in. He's also a counsellor in Hampshire with drug addicts. And when you look at what happens, the performance in terms of trying to control drug addiction, we have monstrously failed. Okay, poor Joe Fitzpatrick had to resign, and he did so, and he's a nice guy, and I understand why he did so. But that's unacceptable when you cannot go around wasting money that could be used on certain things because you're not either you can't manage it, you don't have the competence to manage it, and not using that money to benefit those that it really could benefit.
Yes, some of the waste that I've seen, and at least Fife Council, because that's where I'm based, is staggering. So I could only imagine the kind of waste that's at Holyrood, and then on top of that, the waste that's at Westminster. I can only imagine the waste that's happening down there. I mean, we've seen firsthand the track and trace waste. That was 37 billion.
It's worse down there.
So, I can only imagine that waste. And I totally agree. Like, the chief executive situation in councils is sort of mind-blowing to me. I don't understand why they've went that way. It seems like a really inefficient way to work the system. I don't get it.
Well, I think it comes back to what motivates the people that are in power. I mean, they want to retain power, and they want, as I do, they want independence for Scotland. But, you're there to do more than just that. That's one part of the journey. It's what you do after that, and what kind of society you create once you've got that. And I haven't yet seen, apart from the use of the word Alba, I've yet to see any policies from Alba. I'm nothing against salmon. That's as well. I mean, I don't like the list system, although I was elected on it. But where are the policies? And why are there promises coming out 3-4 weeks before an election. Why aren't these ongoing and addressed? And why isn't the waste, as you rightly say, why isn't the waste being addressed properly, and certain projects, something I call pretty projects at national level, being noted through? We have to have a hierarchy of how do we fix problems in our local communities, and then also invest to get rid of some of the problems like poverty, drug addiction, etc., by creating prosperity, because you can never distribute wealth until you create it.
Yeah. So in terms of the Alba policies, they were supposed to be out today at midday, but I went and checked their Facebook page and their YouTube page and stuff, and they never went live. So there seems to be some sort of a failure there, which does not bode well.
I wonder if it's coming out during...
Well,
the assumption is that...
what they can do, if they've I'm not saying they have, right? But it's always... We have a lot of fun just now because we've just updated the manifesto, as we have done every month. And I said to Andy, well, Alba Energy, Alba Housing, some of the other stuff. I mean, what would happen if we changed the name this month? Would there be another party? That was very pompous, because I'm not suggesting for 1 minute it came out of our manifesto. But what is not pompous is, and you're absolutely right, this election has slid down a very dangerous slope towards personalities and promises that will never be kept, because we won't be able to fund them for a few years, instead of talking about people and policies. And that's what it is. It's people and policies versus personalities and promises.
So where do you see... How do you see yourself gaining independence? How do you think it's going to happen? Do you think there's going to be a Section 30 granted? Do you think there's going to be a quote-unquote unofficial referendum? Do you think there's going to be a two-thirds majority? Apparently that's enough to start negotiations about independence. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, this is very frustrating. But I mean, as we keep saying, if we hold the balance of power, and that's not in the current environment, anything could happen. And if you look at what happens in Finland and Denmark with the number of parties they've got, anything could happen. But any negotiated deal, and we support this, if there's a majority of pro-independence MSPs, we can either take that as a mandate to hold an independence referendum, or a mandate to negotiate with Westminster, subject, of course, to the response of Westminster. But we see, Westminster, I never understand this. Westminster are not on a particularly good wicket, because any negotiated deals, I say, would have to be put to the Scottish people. But if you look at what happened in 1976, the Westminster government signed the UN Charter on human rights. And one of the human rights was that peoples have the right to self-determination. Clause 2A of the UN Charter on Human Rights says we're entitled to there's rights to self-determination under that clause in the UN Charter signed by the UK. So I've written to several people, mentioned in the press, but the hard situation is in a negotiation and sitting across the table, and okay, you might say it's a bit bumptious, but if I was sitting across the table from Bojo, I put that charter in front of him, signed by Harold Wilson, saying you can refuse Section 30 if you like, but you or your government in 1976 signed a charter, a clause in the UN Charter that said we have the right to self-determination, and if a pro-independence majority results from this election, then that would certainly give us the right to put forward a referendum to the people on secession from the UK. And frankly, if Johnson had any nous about him at all, given the problems that they've got in the north of England, he should be looking with the Scottish government, with the Welsh government, and with Ireland, if you like, to the creation of independent bodies within the British Isles Council. And for the life of me, on the basis of that, I don't understand why we still got some people running around saying we've got to go back in and join the EU when we wouldn't have one fiddling say about anything.
So we've briefly talked about it. Alba. So when Alba came out, AFI and ISP stood down to allow Alba to sort of be the party, so to speak. And Scotia Future did not. Are you standing on the list or just constituencies?
Yes, we are. No, there's no point. I mean, there's no point in me in us. And some of our members have said, well, wait a minute, asking the same question about gaming the system. There's no point in us saying that the list system doesn't actually adds to the problem of representation. It doesn't take away from it. And particularly if you have a very heavily centralised management decision making in a major party, then that makes it, the list MSP is almost redundant. In fact, I was told that by one member of, I won't say which party, but that I was only a list MSP, so why was I getting involved in constituency matters? So I was asked to. So, I've been asked the question, we've been asked the question often, would we join with Alba? I said, no, would they like to join with us? I mean, again, we're back to personalities. And understandably, a lot of people have said they believe that the leader of Alba might lead them to having a significant pro-independence majority. And I really hope I am wrong if that happens. Can you imagine what that parliament is going to look like? How it's going to act, given that the main proponents and major leaders haven't exactly had the fondest of recent memories. And I don't worry about them. I worry about the people they're supposed to represent. So no, we grounded our organisation on the basis of having sound policies. They're not all right. I mean, people pick holes in them, but that's. We built up our website. We built up a system that would track our membership. It was a confidential system. We set up relationships with people out with Scotland. And I actually think that we're much further down the road than Alba. At least our logo has been registered.
That's a good point.
I understand theirs hasn't. I mean, it's difficult. The Electoral Commission were not easy. They have a job to do, and we respect that. But, I think it's only fair to go to the constituency and the list, the regional people, and say, look, there's our policies, and we'll be putting them up nightly now on the Scotia Future website. These are our policies. Tell us what you think. Why would we join an organisation that really, I don't think, is ready in the widest sense? I understand why they did it, but
so you're basically so you're basically one of the parties, like, rather than like what AFI and stuff were doing, where you're actually hoping to do pro-independence, but you also have your own policies and you all stand together as a party going forward, I think what a lot of the AFI guys were doing, but they were becoming independents once they got in.
Yeah, but I mean, with all due respect, Dave Thompson had an office next to me in the Parliament. And I'm not sure it was him or whether it was that. But how can you go, honestly, to people and say, if you vote for us, we got a pro-independence majority? I think it's only then that people said, yeah, but what else do you stand for? And there was no answer.
That was.
Sorry, let me go. Hello?
Sorry, on you go. I butted in for no reason there.
No, I'm saying, it's an honour to get, even if you just get one vote, it's an honour. But you can't go to people and say, give us your vote, and we'll tell you afterwards what we're going to do. Now, AFI didn't do that, and they said, they were very honest, and Dave Thompson is honest. That's what they would do, but I don't think that's right that you just say, we're going there to bolster pro-independence. If that's the case, why did we need AFI? People could have voted for SNP both in the constituency and on the list. And I know the system works against that to some extent, but then that's up to them to, that's not for the system to be played with. That's up to the parties that want that to work as hard as they can to get as many votes.
There you go. You cool there? Oh. Excellent. Well, Chic, we have one last thing we're going to do with you. That's to do minutes.
Well, actually, before we start that, how many candidates are you actually standing? Is there just the two of you, or is there a few?
Gives me time to set up.
No, we've got a fair number, but there's just the two of us standing this time. And, I'm pretty well known in the Ayr constituency. Andy's a councillor and a very good councillor in Renfrewshire South. And, we're building up gradually. We wish we'd had, frankly, the funding to do a job and get more people out there properly. But, that takes a few years, but we've started and we'll continue and we won't finish.
There you go. So, one of the last things we really like to do with the candidates is I have enough of pet hate for hustings and radio shows that only give the politician a lot of the time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to answer really big questions, which is why I much prefer doing the podcast, because we get to have a full-blown adult conversation rather than sort of sticking things into sound bites. But I do like the idea of right at the end, the candidate's been forced right into the deep end to actually just do 2 minutes and tell us why we should vote for you as a person. So we're going to do that right now. Chic.
Okay.
So I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and I'll give you a wee countdown before we start. 3, 2, 1.
I think people should vote for me as an individual because they know some of the work I've done locally, but importantly for Scotia Future because we believe that we have a programme laid out, policies laid out that are relevant to the vast majority of people. And the other thing is we believe, and I believe, that integrity is a very, very important element, the characteristic of anybody who wants to represent the people. And I think that we have that. And we will continue to have that, elected or not, but I hope elected. And on top of the integrity, we've got experience and proven competence in other areas that will, I know, bring benefits to the people at large. So that's why they should vote for Scotia Future. And as a foot soldier in Scotia Future, that's why I think they should vote for me in Ayr and Andy in Renfrewshire.
There you go. That was 1 minute and 8 seconds. Fantastic. Thank you, Chic.
It's okay.
Right. Well, again, thank you for joining us. We'll let you go, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon, man.
Well, best of luck to you, Chip.
Right, best of your luck. Right, best of you, man. Best of luck.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Right, cheerio.